thanks for joining us. When we first reached out to you and Abnormal, our podcast was called Tech Leaders Podcast, and we found out that that was stolen 5 years ago.
Oh,
We just started ours,
bastards.
and it was a
How
reseller out
could
of
they?
the UK, and they were doing the exact same thing as we're doing. So I don't know if that's validation for this being an okay idea or that we're just really unoriginal. But now we're Tech to Exec podcast, and we're super excited. So
Or
our
if we're just
purpose.
like slow and behind the times. I mean, there's lots of things we've got to figure out.
I talked to my wife, Michelle, and I said, somebody else had the same name, Tech Leaders Podcast. Can you believe that? And she just looked at me like, it's the most boring, dumb name. Of course, two people have the same name. So our purpose and really why we came together is a little different than the Tech Leaders one, is we want to help IT teams talk to their executives about technical solutions, about cybersecurity solutions in a way that an executive would care and understand like the risk and why all those things. So everything we talk about, whether it's a customer story or what Abnormal does, we just want to wrap around like, why in the heck would a executive care? Like, how would we communicate? So we really appreciate you jumping on. Just to introduce myself, I'm Mike Linton, CEO of Valcom, and
And I'm Josh Linton, the CIO of Alcom. And I think, like Mike said, most of our customers are IT leaders. And we have found, as we've worked with them for many years, that sometimes they don't are not prepared to communicate the business need of a technology.
Mhm.
And I think that's part of what we're trying to do is to help them hear from different technologies, but give them some tools for communicating those business needs to the executives. So with that introduction, Mick, please tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and Abnormal, and a little bit about the company.
Yeah, happy to do that. First of all, I just want to say thanks, guys, for having me on. I appreciate it. My name is Mick Leach. I'm the field CISO here at Abnormal. Been here about 4 years. Initially started as the head of security operations, building out the internal security program. Then about 2 years ago, moved into a more customer-facing speaking role. So gave me the ability to connect with our customers and prospects, helping folks understand how we can solve some problems today. Just a little bit of background, just, for context sake, had been building and leading security operations, engineering, and architecture capabilities at Fortune 500 companies for the previous, dozen years or so before that. So been around the security industry for quite some time. It's my real pleasure to be here. Here at Abnormal, our goal is to stop cybercrime and protect humans using AI. That's a noble goal. As you can see in my background, right, with my flag here, I'm patriotic. I'm a former military guy. So that resonates deeply with me personally. It's one of the reasons that I joined this company. And to do that, our platform is using behavioral data science powered by AI and ML to protect against phishing and social engineering and account takeovers. And additionally, we're bringing AI to bear on the problem of security awareness training, right? I think we all know that that's been broken for quite some time. And this is allowing companies to up-level their training using AI to make it more specific and relevant and timely. I think those are the biggest key things that we need to address in terms of fixing security awareness training. So that's what brought me here. That's why Abnormal exists, and excited to be on the podcast.
thank you. What area of the military were you in?
I was in the Army for almost 9 years, so 8.5, a little over 8.5 years. So I was a scout. So Scouts Out for anybody, 19 Delta, if anybody knows what that means.
Nice.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means. We're brothers, in case the last name didn't give it away. And
Okay.
it looks, because we look a lot alike.
Right.
Sure, sure. It was the hairstyle that really
The
got me.
hair. Yeah.
He was in the Army National Guard as an engineer for 20 or 30 years. And so we appreciate the service. I don't know if it's awkward when we thank you for your service. I have a neighbor that works for the Air Force, and I say, thank you for your service every time I see him at church. And he's like, rolls his eyes. He's like, you don't have to thank me. It's a good job, but thank you for doing that. And so what, if you were just talking to a CEO, not very technical, what would you explain Abnormal does?
Well, I think those are the main things right there on the front end, right? In terms of the problems that we're trying to solve these days, what we're seeing is that threat actors are targeting humans more than they're targeting systems. Frankly, because it's easier to hack a human than it is to hack a system. I don't need any special skills or hacking, infrastructure. It's much easier to hack humans than it is to hack systems. You just have to convince them to do something that they probably ought not do. And the reality is, this has been around for a long, long time, right? If you think about, this is the art of the con, the confidence game. It's really just in the world of digital, the digital age has simply moved. The way that the bad actors connect with the attack, the targets, if you will. And so that's the big thing. And so, what we're seeing is that email remains the primary threat vector for bad actors. And if you think about why, it makes sense, right? It's the broadest attack surface that every company has. Every company still has to use email to do business. It's still how business is done today. Even though it's been around for, 30 years, 30 plus years, it's still the way that business is done. And the other aspect of that is it reaches directly into the heart of the weakest link that every company has, which are its well-meaning users, right? These employees, maybe they haven't been hurt like I have, which is what all security guys have been hurt somehow. That's what makes us suspicious and naturally good at our jobs. Fine. But the reality is, you think of your finance folks, you hire them to pay bills. That's your job. And when they get an invoice in that looks right, the numbers add up close to what they're used to seeing. It comes from an address that looks about right, and what they're used to seeing. They're just going to pay that bill, right? They're not going to dig deeper into it, and naturally be concerned about the fact that the bank is switching accounts, those kinds of things. So, that's the biggest problem that we're seeing today. But adding one more thing on that, I see, Mike, you want to add something.
No, I love what
One
you're
other
saying.
aspect to this that I want to tag in real quickly, though, is that AI is enabling, hyper personalized attacks at scale. Each basically is its own 0 day, right? An attack that's never been seen before. So all the threat intelligence that we've been saving up for decades, trying to define what evil looks like and then hunting for that definition, that doesn't work anymore. And we feel like this is really the way that AI can be brought to bear on this problem. So that's in a nutshell. I apologize, a little long-winded, but that's
Great.
the problem that we're trying to solve, and we really feel like AI and ML were purpose-built to bring to bear on this problem.
That's really interesting. Tell us, are there any I kind of think about this war stories. What are some stories that you've and now I thouut about that, but now that you're in the military, I'm like, maybe that's the wrong term to use. But
That's all right. It's all
kind
a
of
battle,
these,
right?
yeah. Are there stories that you've heard recently, kind of that you said, man, whether abnormal would have helped or not? Tell us a little bit about some of these stories, maybe that you've heard, recently that would resonate, or to a certain extent make us think, shoot, maybe I should be thinking about this, doing better.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, well, what I'll do is I'll give you a couple of my own personal stories, right? Remember, before I joined Abnormal, I was a customer of Abnormal.
Yeah.
I was on the front lines defending a Fortune 500 bank from threat actors. And just a couple quick stories. First was a sextortion campaign. If you haven't seen these, right, this is where a bad actor will purport, they'll send an email to you and say, hey, I caught you surfing pornography on your corporate computer, because who doesn't do that? I turned on your webcam. Listen, there's some spicy images here. I'm going to send this out to your entire company and everyone you know if you don't send me some money. And it's usually in the form of Bitcoin or some sort of, digital currency. And I remember, and these are quite common, but I will tell you, and we had good defenses, and those are pretty easily captured most of the time. In this case, I had an enterprising threat actor who had taken a screenshot of the extortion note. Well, the resulting JPEG file, right, that image file, wasn't malicious by itself in any way, shape, or form. And my, security controls couldn't read the words in the picture, so it had no idea that it was malicious. And this began to cause quite a stir when it sailed through my multi-million-dollar tech stack and began landing in inboxes all through my company. I started getting these weird phone calls. Mick, do you know how to open a Bitcoin wallet? I
Oh,
said, wait, what? Why would, you know what? I don't want to know why you think that's necessary. I'm just going to tell you, please don't do that, right? And for me, that was the moment I realized that, the tools that I had been bringing to bear on this problem were no longer working. And I went on the hunt for something else. So that's one of the stories. I will give you one more short one. Shortly after I bought Abnormal, it was probably about 6 weeks after I bought Abnormal. I got a phone call from one of my finance managers who said, Mick, your stupid new email security solution just ate a very important email. It turns we're late on remitting payment on a $900,000 payment. This is a Fortune 500, so that's like a rounding error for us. I mean, that's not a lot of money back then. But I need this back. We need to pay this immediately. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And I admittedly was kind of waiting for that first big shoe to drop. When anytime you implement a new tool, you're waiting for it to break something. And this was the first call I got. It was about 6 weeks in. And so I wasn't terribly surprised. But I got to be honest, I was looking at this message and I couldn't figure out if it was bad or good. I've been doing security at that point for 20 years. And it definitely came from our trusted vendors' email environment, right? The SPF, the DMARC, the DKIM, they all checked out, right? It was technical phrases. But in other words, the authenticity of the sender was validated. It definitely came from our trusted vendors' solution. However, the wording of it was more formal than we had seen from them in a long time. We'd, build monthly with them for decades and had a great relationship. So it was more informal normally. This was a very formally orchestrated message. It also mentioned that they had been through an audit recently and were changing bank accounts. And so there was a new bank account number, routing number to remit payment to. But I don't have that kind of context, or I'm a security guy. I'm looking at this. That could go either way. So I picked up the phone. I called my finance manager back and I said, listen, Abnormal thinks it's bad. Could you, and I can't tell either way, could you do me a favor and just pick up the phone and give him a call? Don't reply to the email, please. Pick up the phone and call it. And she said, sure, no problem. Well, she called me back about 15 minutes later and said, Mick, it wasn't them. And I went, oh my gosh. Turns out they were on the front end of what turned out to be a compromise of one of their email accounts. Bad actor. They later learned, we learned months later at this point, that they had been in their email environment for something like 9 months.
oh,
Laying low, watching, waiting, learning who they do business with, what those invoices look like, what that cadence is, what those amounts are, and then used, an LLM to write the message so that there weren't any misspellings. Now it made it more formal. And that's what one of the dead giveaways for us was, right? For Abnormal. And so we were able to catch this. And it, in one fell swoop, 6 weeks after I deployed it, it saved us $900K. I mean, you talk about return on investment. I nearly pulled a hamstring on my victory lap around, the office, trying to explain this to my leadership folks. We made a really good decision here that saved us a lot of money. So those are a couple of stories, but these are not new, right? These aren't unique either. We hear about this all the time. As I go out and meet with customers in the field, they're telling me stories about catching, direct deposit frauds where bad actors are creating a Gmail account and sending a note over to finance and saying, hey, I forgot to change my bank account. I'm on vacation now. That's why I'm sending this from my personal account, which is a best security practice, right? Because you don't have access to your corporate email while you're on vacation. And then say, hey, listen, I changed banks at the beginning of the month. I totally forgot. Can you switch it over to my new bank account? And we're seeing that all the time.
How did Abnormal catch that where others wouldn't have? Like, how
So
is that possible?
Yeah, so that was the biggest difference for me, and the biggest kind of light bulb that I wanted to be a part of what they were doing, because the approach was so different than anything I had seen so far. Was that using natural language processing and natural language understanding, it can actually interrogate the body of the message and understand the sentiment of what's being communicated. It can understand the tone of what's being written. It can understand this is more formal, and it can compare against the history of what we've seen in the past and say, hang on, this looks more formal. And oh, by the way, there's a financial, urgency, or, there's a financial tone to this, and an urgent sentiment to it. There's even like sentiment analysis. And so when you add those things together, and then you combine it with, well, we just haven't seen this happen before, this is unusual and potentially malicious. And so it'll flag it and it'll remediate it, and then we can dig deeper.
Wow. I was nervous during your story. I'm like, is this going to end well? Because if it looks good and someone says, hey, your email system caught an important email, that is the most frustrating thing. Like
Oh, sure.
I am so frustrated when I want a good email and it is good and they aren't asking for a switch over. How, and I think the stories illustrate this. If you were just talking to an executive and they're worried, but maybe not as worried as they need to be. Like they're like, our finance has it. We have all the systems in place. You said, and I wrote it down, easier to hack a human than a system. Do you
Yeah.
see executives understanding that, or do they think, hey, it's on the IT guy to make sure we're secure? Like, how do we get that through our heads as executives that it's not an IT problem, it's a executive problem mostly? Is that true? I
Sure.
probably shouldn't
Sure.
say that, but they're
Well, it
usually the
is.
ones that I mean, like, yeah, it is. And how come? Just because they're the ones targeted, or because they're dumber with technology? I mean, what's the real answer there?
Well, it's definitely not dumber, right? I want to take a moment, because I take issue with that only because I hear security people say this all the time, and it drives me crazy. Um, our executives and our user base, yes, there are always outliers, right? But they're well-meaning. They want to do their jobs and they want to do them well. It's just that this isn't their job, right? Security isn't their primary focus. And you think about how executives work, right? They're moving quickly. They're working largely on mobile devices because they're on the move, whether they're moving from meeting to meeting or they're traveling. All of these are good reasons. The reality is, bad guys know this, and they deliberately send things kind of on the fringes of the time ranges, right? They'll send it at 7 a.m. or 6 p.m., right? When our executives are probably on their mobile phones, right? And you can't interrogate a message quite as easily that way. I can't click on it or hover over a link as easily see the details of the sender, which are frankly what we've been teaching our executives, rightly so, to be on the watch for a long time. These are the things, the tactics we've been telling them to employ, but it's not easy to do on mobile, or when they're busy or when they're in a hurry, and that's what bad actors understand. They also are trying to change kind of the emotions of what you're doing. So we see this very commonly. Bad actors are targeting, in terms of hacking humans, the key to that is emotion. So if I can make you feel urgent, right? Try and go quickly, because when we go fast, we make mistakes. Or if we get angry, right? If I poke and prod at someone, and they get angry and they snap off a reply real quickly, now we have now we have engagement. And so now we can work with that, because that's really the key now, is that it all starts with a conversation. A lot of the key tactics that bad guys have been using for decades were things like malicious links or malicious attachments, and those still exist. But the reality is, our security tools have gotten quite good at ferreting those out and blocking those. So now what we're seeing is what we're calling payloadless malware, which is another way of saying social engineering. If I can just convince you to reply back to me and start a conversation, now we're building trust as we go. and I can lead you down a path to doing something that you shouldn't really do. And so that's more what we're seeing in terms of the way bad actors are kind of attacking our executives now. So I say all of that to say they're not necessarily dumb; they're just busy, and they're trying to do their jobs and do them well. And bad actors know this. And so these are kind of the keys to that. They try to get emotion involved. They'll either make you afraid, right? A good classic example, if you're trying to attack a, a broad company, is sending a note about a layoff, right? There's a potential layoff. I need you to click here for more details. That'll send you somewhere you shouldn't go. But if you can make folks afraid, they'll click on something they normally wouldn't. If you can make them excited about something, hey, you've been selected to win a prize, right? For years, the Publisher Clearinghouse used to bring. I'm showing my age a little bit here, but maybe we all get this. Used to bring those letters in the mail, and bad folks would do the same thing and ask you to call them back in the old, paper days. Well, the same thing's happening digitally as well. So if they can convince you to do something, interact with them in some way, then they can take it from there and lead you down a path.
That's super interesting. One of the things, and maybe this is it, but one of the things that I was curious about is you're looking at kind of what's going on right now. Do you see, if you had your crystal ball and you're looking into the next 12 months, do you see it being the same with AI? Obviously, things are moving a little bit more quickly. Is there anything that you would recommend, either these same types of things that you've talked about, or is there something else over the next 12 months that risks or trends that the leaders should keep an eye out for?
Yeah, so I do think that AI is going to continue to be brought to bear in terms of the attack vector. Bad guys are using it today, but I think its use is going to just continue to skyrocket up, which means that the challenge is both in terms of the sophistication of the attacks, meaning it's not necessarily that AI is going to make them more sophisticated as any attack we'd ever seen, but now every attack can be as sophisticated as any attack we've ever seen. And I think that's what's important to understand. But the other aspect is, using AI, bad guys can now automate huge chunks of the attack life cycle. So from recon phase to the delivery, the weaponization, even actions on objective, all of that can be up leveled using AI, which means the scale of these attacks is going to continue to mount in a way we've just simply never seen before. This makes the old script kiddie days seem like nothing, and that's what is, for me, truly terrifying in terms of how things are changing going forward. I think at the core, the biggest thing that is kind of eroded here is trust. And we saw this during the elections. We see this during any big political movement. You can no longer trust your eyes or ears, what you see, what you hear, what you read, because it can all be manipulated. And the same is true for the way bad actors are targeting and trying again to manipulate you to do something. And so, that's they're undermining trust. And so that's kind of the big challenge. Now, not to leave you hanging on bad news, I think in terms of good news, or at least recommendations, what I think we ought to be looking for is solutions that are leveraging AI for good to battle the use of AI for bad. I think that's going to be key going forward. There are lots of good solutions out there, and they go across the entire tech landscape. So you don't have to worry about, it's not just one sliver or one, solution type. It's not just EDR, XDR. It can be, your email platform, your XDR platform, right? Your firewalls, your cloud environment, all of these things, the solutions that we're looking as executives to bring into our environments. We should definitely be looking for solutions that are leveraging AI at their core. I think that's going to be the big difference maker going forward.
I love that. Thank you. I've just got a lot going through my head of the things I'm like, hey, easier to hack a human than a system. Executives are smart. They're just and well-meaning. They're moving fast. That we have to leverage AI. at the core of the system? Because everyone's talking AI, but
Mhm.
they're not really doing AI in their DNA as far as all of them. So it's hard to differentiate that, I would say, especially for an executive. They might say, yeah, does it have AI, or how does it use AI? And so any insight on what you would tell an executive to ask the IT to know Abnormal has real AI and these people don't? Or how would we even know? Is
Yes.
there a way to know? I mean,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, listen, you've got your finger right on the pulse of one of the hardest challenges that as executives we face today. I will say I was at Black Hat Europe in the fall, and I came across. I like to, I was there for Abnormal, but I'm also a practitioner, so I was going out and seeing the other companies and who else there, and learning. This is a job about learning. And I spoke with an MDR, right, a managed detection and response vendor, and they they said we use AI. I said, great, tell me more. And he said, yeah, so after the detection is fired and the investigation's completed, our analysts use AI to help write up the report. I was like, that's interesting. That's not, I wouldn't say like AI native, that's kind of bolting it on to the end of a process that was already in place. And to be honest, it wasn't really even part of the solution. It's just something your analysts are using on the side to improve their own workflow. I don't know that their service was actually like measurably better because of their use of AI. So I laughed, but I came away from that. I tell you the story because I came away from that realizing that if you go around, every vendor says they're using AI. And it feels like the bulk of my job anymore is separating the pretenders from the contenders, right? Those that are actually using AI versus those that just claim to be using AI and maybe it's bolted on after the fact. And so the advice that I would give to not only executives but technical professionals, whether they're individual contributors or whatever, is double click in, right? Really dig in, ask questions. Yeah, I remember an old leader of mine had told me that the 5 why questions, why, and you'll really drive to the heart of what's going on. I would change that to say how. And so you're saying, oh, tell me how. Tell me more about that. Oh, really? Okay. Tell me how that works. And what you want to do is you want to get to the point where they're saying, and this is where, the machine learning, algorithms are running at the core, consuming all of the, the deliverables that we have coming in, all of the metrics and whatever, processing all of that data, and then identifying sort of that thread of truth that's running through it all. That's ultimately what ML was purpose built for. AI was purpose built for. And so, that's really where you want to get to the heart of that and understand, find those folks that are really doing it.
That's great. I think one thing you said earlier on that I've kept thinking about was how you pulled a hamstring running your victory lap. Now that was fun. Not that you pulled your hamstring, but something that maybe tech leaders sometimes don't do as well is finding an opportunity to really drive home the ROI on some of these technologies. Right? Our those technical leaders are typically in the crosshairs when something is going wrong, and a little bit thankless of a job when things are going right. So I do think, I don't know how, but just a reminder, I think a good reminder for our tech leaders to, in the best way possible, to bring those things to the executive leaders to say, hey, let's just make sure everybody knows that we paid for this. There is an ROI. There is some value here that you didn't see because you didn't lose $900,000. And I think that's an important thing to find opportunities to do, because sometimes we're selling it up front and then forget about the value on the back end, especially around cybersecurity. So that's one thing that I've been thinking about as we've been
Mick,
talking about it. So
Josh, I think that is probably a question I want to ask everyone. Mick, any system or process that you and advice you would give to an IT leader of how you've seen that done effectively? I mean,
Mhm.
you did it because you were on the front lines, you did that,
Sure.
but in your experience, as you've seen others do that? I just want to double click on that and say, how do we do that more effectively? Because I believe that is really necessary and lacking in the industry. Like, hey, we have this tool and it did this because they're fighting the next fire. So I'd love any insight you have around that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and this couldn't be more true, particularly in the security space. But IT is akin to this as well, where, as long as things are going well, everybody just assumes, like, let's not forget that it's kind of like a duck. If you look at a duck on the water, everything looks calm, but underneath, those legs are paddling like crazy, trying to keep everything moving, keep things steady. And that's kind of how IT and security systems work. On the surface, everything looks great. It's going well. On the back end, there are teams of people working feverishly to keep everything going right. They're defending in terms of uptime and, keeping everything going. And so I think it's important for us as leaders to make sure that we don't neglect that we don't forget to shine a spotlight on the great work that's being done. I think about like the FBI. It's a thankless job because if they told you all of the terror attacks that they, thwarted, you'd probably be terrified. But it would also help you understand they're there, they're working, and it's successful. We in the security and IT space need to be, celebrating those wins. Now we don't have to celebrate them all, and it doesn't, because you don't want to make your executives numb to this either. And so finding the right KPIs, the right metrics that help them understand that our people and our tooling work. And here's how we know that, because we have data that shows that we have X number of attacks that are coming in, and we were able to thwart this number because of either the training that we're giving our users to make them more aware, or better yet, because ultimately the best would be that it doesn't even hit the user in the first place, is our technical solutions, right? We need good technical solutions that protect them. So that's the key thing. And those KPIs, those metrics, those are going to vary from tool to tool to tool. But it's important that we identify those and we celebrate that and we report that on a regular cadence, whether that's monthly or quarterly or whatever.
I love that. And I love that Valcom or a reseller could even help the clients do that for their teams. Like, that's something we have some data and that we could remind them on a monthly or quarterly basis. Have you mentioned how well this is going or not? Because they tell us, but I'm sure they're not communicating that to their executive team of, hey, just FYI, this is really good. I know we use certain solutions in our environment, and I only get mad when my email doesn't come through. And not all the other stuff, but I think it is helpful of, hey, we have been saved. It has made it so we're not wire transferring this or not even being presented with the option to do that because it's so good. I love how you put that. Well, we could talk all day. I had other questions about what you're speaking about at Falcon event conference. I was interested in that. Actually, I'm going to take 2 more minutes of your time. Can you give us what you're going to talk about there? Or Can you tell us? And then we'll wrap up, because I do have a tendency of asking like 50 more questions, but I'm very interested in that, actually. So.
Well, and the problem
if he
is
does, I'll just fall asleep. So we need to anyway.
Gotcha. Well, and the problem is I would stay and talk forever because I love this stuff. If you haven't noticed, I'm passionate about this work.
And you're awesome, by the way. I love the insight.
Great interview.
I've been taking notes, and I'm like, wow, we could talk all day, and I appreciate it a lot. So thank you.
You guys are so kind, man. Wow, I need you guys, hype men like you in my life. So Falcon is CrowdStrike's big conference. It's like their customer conference. Abnormal is a close partner to CrowdStrike's Falcon. And so in fact, they're an investor in us. They see so much value in us that their investment firm that invested $10 million in us a few years ago, just to show how tight that integration is. And so that's what we're trying to show folks, is we as technical leaders, executives, one of the challenges is we buy all of these tools and they don't always work and play well together. And that's a real challenge. It's a real problem because, one of the things for years, I think we've all been sold the idea that they're all going to integrate oh, everything integrates, it's all API, and then they never do. And so that's one of the things that I'm going to Falcon to show is exactly how Abnormal and CrowdStrike integrate, and how it, there's a beautiful better together story with this. How the telemetry that's coming out of Abnormal can inform and make better the detections for CrowdStrike in the the EDR XDR play, as well as they've got an amazing identity capability as well. And so the ability to detect anomalous activity across identities is really important. I keep hearing, and I agree personally, that identity is becoming the new perimeter as we move away from on-premise areas. Identity really has become, if everything's SaaS and everything's SSO, and it is, and it should be, then the identity is really the golden key now. If I can get into that identity, I don't need to break into systems. I'll just log in, and so that's what we're seeing bad actors do. And so the ability to inform, a CrowdStrike capability, or dump all of this data into the CrowdStrike next gen SIM, it allows it to make better determinations on what else is going on in a broader area. So it's really allowing these two things to work and play well together really well.
I love that. Thank you very
Great.
much. I need to go now. They were trying
Come
to
on,
get
it's in
us to go.
Vegas. Who doesn't want to go to Vegas?
We
are
did talk about going, so we're close.
We are
All
closer
right.
to Vegas than Ohio. That's for sure. Well, Mick, thank you so much. I really have found this insightful. I guess I shouldn't compare to others, but this has been one of our favorite. And if people are listening this much and they hear that, well, thank you for listening.
Yeah.
to
Hopefully they don't feel too bad.
But yeah, don't feel too bad. This has been really good. So thank you very much. And thanks for joining the Tech to Exec podcast. We're still working on our ending. We need a really cool ending.
I was gonna say, we've got links if people want to learn more about Abnormal. We've got links in the show notes, so we need to get that in there, and we're working on it. We'll get better.
I love it. I love
Okay.
it. It's awesome.
Well,
Keep it up, guys. This is amazing.
Thank you for your time.
Awesome.
You've been amazing.